All right. So you can see that I got the knocked off the piston. There is a little bit of noise there, but it's not terrible. From the inside, the bearings don't look the worst, but yeah, they need to be replaced. So the whole thing's coming open, but the bearings aren't going to get replaced unless somebody wants the saw, or I get a old carcass saw that I can scavenge parts off of. But at least we'll show you how to take this apart. It's not too difficult at this stage. Everything else is off the saw. I'm going to pull this bushing off. And there's 5 case bolts right here that have to come out. We're going to have to drift a pin out right here. And then after that, we should be able to use a case splitter, either a Husqvarna or a Stihl case splitter, to split this case off. So let's get to it. These are coming out fairly easy. Don't know that they were even put in with any Loctite. Case never leaked. Need a 5mm drift, or 3/16 to drift this pin out. It's right there. Need to get that out before you try and split the case. It's in there pretty good. There we go. All right, you can see we've already loosened it. We got oil coming out now around the gasket. Just lost our light. Be back at you. All right, we're back. We give this crankcase splitting here a try. Could use one of those large case splitters like what you use in Husqvarna. They will work, but Stihl makes their own tool, and in some regards I kind of like it better, and I might even try it on my Huskies, because it eliminates the possibility of causing any damage on the inside of the crankcase when you match up the surface of the splitting tool with the crankcase. So the Stihl splitting tool has all these holes in the bottom, and for the different saw you're using, you just line it up so that the spindle here is lined up with the crankshaft. So screw out the spindle, put that on, and then it's just a matter of finger tightening the bar nuts on this tool. We've taken out the pin and the 5 case bolts. We've loosened it because now we're getting leaking from the oil tank where the gasket is. And then all we got to do is take a 19mm socket and crank this baby home. So we'll get it on here finger tight. There we go. I can already feel everything coming loose, so this works pretty good. Maybe you can see the case there coming apart. Now I'm going to loosen this. There's a pin down in here, a small pin. They don't talk about having to drift that out, but I actually think I'm going to have to do that. This is already pulling off the crankcase, but I don't like the way that the pin is not coming out here. And it looks like I should be able to drift that pin out. Making a mess as usual. So we're going to find an appropriate size drift here, and we're going to get that, at least start driving the pin out. The service manual did not indicate that that had to be driven out, but I don't like the fact that things are not drifting out the way, or coming apart the way they should. Easily, they're coming off at an angle. So we are going to try and get this pin started out here and see if that separates things a little easier. See if we can get this to pop now. Seems to be coming real easy. Yep, now it's sliding off that pin. So I just needed to loosen that pin a little bit so that she starts sliding as I start lifting the case. And there she is. She's free. That was pretty easy. Of course, we got a mess to deal with now with the oil, but such is life. I'm going to try and salvage the oil hose, the oiler hose. So I'm going to be careful here not to damage that. I did not want to, it's new, and I didn't want to grab it with pliers and damage it. At least, assuming that this or some other 044 will come in the shop one of these days, there's no reason why this part here can't be reused. So we're just going to press it out here a little bit, get it started. This is a little gentler on it than having to pull it with a pair of pliers. All right, the oiler hose is out. Okay, now I can get this cleaned up a little bit, and then we will grab the other Stihl puller to pull the, or press the crank shaft out of the ignition side of the case. All right. Now before we leave here and pop the crankshaft out, we got the gasket and just see what kind of shape we're in. It's always a pain if we have to go to a lot of effort to scrape off gasket, and these are coming off nice, which is good. There'll be a little bit of cleanup work potentially, and the riskiest part is right around the crankshaft area. That's where it gets hottest, so where it's most likely, you can see it broke right there, so I may have to that came off pretty well. There we go, got the rest. So those are nice clean surfaces. I'll probably take a little bit of Scotch-Brite to them, especially this side here, but they'll clean up very nicely. And for, you know, if the time should come that this the parts from this saw are ever used. But at any rate, I will now be back at you when it's time to pop this out. All right, so the clutch side, which is really dirty on the other side, not so much here, doesn't make a lot of noise. It doesn't feel perfectly smooth. And now that we've, you know, pulled the crankshaft out, we pretty much have no choice but to replace it. On the flywheel side, these should, again, be really glass smooth, and they shouldn't make a lot of noise. See if you can hear this. So definitely you can tell that the bearing on the ignition side is starting to go. It's not terribly dirty though. But, I do think it was a good idea that this got cracked open, rather than trying to reuse it as was. Unfortunately, the customer isn't going to want to invest any more money in it, so as I said earlier, it's gonna just turn into a part saw, and given how old this saw is, the parts may never see the light of day again and get put back into service. But anyway, for those of you who do have an 044, we're showing you a little bit of stuff, how-to stuff here, if you end up completely doing a bottom end rebuild. So I'll be right back at you as soon as I find the other case disassembly tool. All right, let's see if we can do this. So I'm going to try and use the Stihl tool, and the old Stihl tool was kind of this big plate with a rod. Holes would line up for the holes for your saw where the case bolts are. Screw that down, and then there's a stem. You'd kind of line it up with a number based upon the saw, and then it would just, you know, push this out. And it's been superseded, I believe, with this other tool. And I must say, I have to not hand it to Stihl. They did not do a good job. This is in my opinion a hokey way to do this, but basically you got these 3 arms, these screws. This will pivot around and line up. These are basically threaded the same as the case bolts are, and they're gonna fit in from the back side. And so it might dawn on you right away that the way these are machined and all that, there's usually burrs on the end of where those case bolts daylight out, if they even daylight out at all. And so what you have to do is, I had to come in with these long bolts all the way from the backside and get through that to deburr it. And of course, that's a risk. You're taking a big risk there. And then when you come back in this side, there's no guarantee that you're going to get it to line up with the thread. So you're taking the risk is that you're going to cross thread things. And you do that, then you've wrecked your case, or you have to get some different kind threaded, some inserts or different threaded bolts on drill and tap, and yeah, not worth it. Which would have very much essentially wrecked this crankcase for any future use. So it's got these arms. It's got for a couple different saws, you got a couple of these. This will fit over the crankshaft on the flywheel side here. And so what you're trying to do is line up all these arms and bolts and the main stem here, the tool. And so I'm just we're doing this in real time, but I'm just gonna try and get these started by hand. And it may take you a little bit to make sure those threads grab but aren't getting cross-threaded. So once you think you got them threaded, use your Torx bit here and then just gently drive them home. If you start feeling resistance, then right away, then you don't have it lined up and you're risking cross-threading. So anyway, this seems to be going in well. So what I'm going to do is just keep driving this home, at least until I have most of the threads in the case grabbed with these bolts. So I'm just filling on the back side here, and when I feel the bolt begin to daylight through, I'm going to stop. That should give me enough grab. Okay, so since they've all daylight on the back side, they're roughly at about the same depth now. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is then by hand here tighten this bolt and get it up to the top of these 4 bolts. I'm not real sold on this design. Did I say that already? I just don't like it. This just seems very, very hokey to me. I'm not liking the way, I just don't feel right about this right here. So I'm going to drop this I'm going to drop the whole thing down a little bit more. So that I know I have plenty of grab here. And I'm now going to take over with my drill and just get these bolts seated. I'm not going to get it tight up against the arms. Just getting it close, and I'll finish the rest by hand. So you can see what it looks like here on the other side. I've got these bolts coming out, and because these arms are at different lengths, they're popping through at different lengths. But I'm now just gonna get them tightened down enough where they're grabbing the arms. Okay. All right, so now the idea is I tighten this nut, this bolt, and it's gonna push out the crankshaft. Let's see what we got here for size. I'm guessing that's, well, at least a 15, better than a 15. Could that even be a 19? I doubt it. That's too big. $17. It's a 17 mil. All right. Now, at this point, theoretically, all we have to do is just crank on this thing. All right, so it's moving the crank, which is probably not what we want. Did I say I'm not a fan of this damn tool? Gonna try and make a go of it though. So it looks like it is coming, but what it's also doing is it's bringing the bearing with it. And that's not a huge deal. We can deal with that using a bearing puller. But, you know, the idea is you got to grab this little sleeve, which has a hex head configuration on it, so that you can pull in the opposite direction. So if you notice here, what it's doing is it's basically pressing the bearing out with the crankshaft. Again, that'll be all right. I should be able to use a bearing puller to get that off. So you can see it's just slowly pressing it out, and there, and now she's out. So it worked. But the issue, obviously, that we had was the bearing wanted to come with it. So you're going to have to take a small bearing puller to pull that off so that we can actually use the crank. And I'm looking at the pocket and not seeing any 90-degree marks in the crankcase that should be a cause for concern. Doesn't really matter. It doesn't involve the sealing surface on the crankcase where the oil seal is. So there you have it. That's how you, at least using that particular tool. Now I'm just going to back out these screws here. There, our puller is off. Just for giggles. Just want to make sure I didn't cause any issues here with these. Nope, everything. I did it right, but that made me a little nervous. So there you have it. Can see that things were starting to get a little dirty in there. So I think we did have a leak started from the oil seal. Wasn't bad, but so it was the right time to replace the seals, and from the feel of the bearings, it was time to replace them too. All right, so very well could be the last video, either ever or in quite a while, until either the original customer or some other customer comes along and needs work done on a Stihl 044. I'm not going to go over knocking out the bearings. I've covered that in other videos. No different between Stihl and Husqvarna. You can press them out using arbors and pressing sleeves, or you can heat them up and knock them out with a socket. Basically whatever suits you. All right, all for now. Bowman out.